Welcome back. Now, more on those reports that Saudi Arabia is pleading with the United States to restock its supply of missiles amid ongoing drone and missile attacks by the Iran-linked Houthi rebels in Yemen. This as Saudi Arabia's de facto ruler, Mohammed bin Salman, continues his tour of the region. For more on all of that, we're joined by former White House Middle East envoy Jason Greenblatt, who's also the host of the Diplomat podcast by Newsweek. Thank you very much for being with us. So, first of all, let's talk about this report. Saudi Arabia says that its stocks of Patriot missiles are running dangerously low. Given how the Biden administration has been pressuring the Saudis to end this war, do you think that might be an issue?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Laura. I think if the reports are true, and I read them myself this morning, there was a big article in the Wall Street Journal. If the reports are true, it's incumbent on the Biden administration to resupply our longtime friend and ally, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia's stability is important, not just obviously for Saudi Arabia, but for the entire Middle East and for the United States. Imagine, if you will, if we didn't restock Israel. Saudi Arabia finds itself in the same position as Israel. I've been in both countries when there have been attacks, missile attacks raining down on Tel Aviv, missile attacks raining down on Riyadh. I was on a plane once in Riyadh heading to Jeddah. It's the same issue, all instigated by Iran. And I think that it is important for the United States to support Saudi Arabia, not only for the region, for itself, but even out of naked self-interest. Imagine what's going to happen to oil prices if we don't help our friend and ally Saudi Arabia with this issue.
Quite. Well, we just saw just a few days ago an attack on the Aramco facilities in Jeddah. I mean, how worrying are those Houthi attacks on Saudi infrastructure? Is it just a matter of time before some significant damage is done? And we're even hearing that the Patriot missiles might not even be effective against these drone attacks from the Houthis.
Look, it is all worrying. Iran is worrying. Iran is worrying to the entire region, including Israel, including Jordan, by the way, including the Palestinians. People forget that Palestinians are in the same line of fire as Israel here. It is very worrying, and I think the region needs to band together, hopefully together with Israel, to protect and secure the Middle East from the thuggish, criminal, murderous desires of the Iranian regime.
Meanwhile, let's talk about Saudi diplomacy, which is something that you touched on in your recent podcast. You're talking to a Saudi official, Fahad Nazer, about that. Now, you've got Mohammed bin Salman on this tour of the region right now. He's in Dubai right now. He's in the UAE. What do you read into this tour? Is this the prince, trying to get back on the world stage after being ostracized, partly because of the Yemen war and partly because of the killing of the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi?
Yeah, well, I think it's showing, I think the Crown Prince is showing that the GCC remains intact. I think the rift between some members of the GCC and Qatar has healed. This is part of the healing process. I think it shows that the GCC is important. Within the GCC, the countries themselves are important to each other security-wise, are important to each other defense-wise, are important to each other economic-wise. And I think this is part of his way of showing each of those countries that they need to and should and are banding together to stay strong and stay important together.
Do you think there's a bit of rivalry between the Saudis and notably Crown Prince bin Salman and the UAE, which has been very active on the world stage?
I think there's always going to be friendly rivalry between allies. The United States has it with Canada. The United States has it with countries in the European Union. But I think it's a friendly rivalry. I think they know that together they're better off. Together they are stronger. And I think that they will compete in business. And hopefully they'll compete, but in a friendly and diplomatic way on the world stage. And I think each of them has a lot to bring to the world stage.
And just going back to the Khashoggi killing, because there has been a development today in that a Saudi national has been arrested in connection with the killing in Paris. We don't have any more details on that as yet. But just going back to your podcast, when you were speaking about the case, and you kind of really got the feeling from that the Saudis feel that they've been unfairly treated about this case.
I do feel that way. I think what happened obviously is horrific. I think MBS, the Crown Prince, acknowledged that in a 60-minute interview. I think that we can't look at every issue with respect to Saudi Arabia through the lens of Khashoggi. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way diplomatically, and it doesn't work that way politically. Things happen. It was horrific. It needs to be addressed. People need to be punished. The Crown Prince had said he will find the perpetrators and punish them, but we can't have every discussion about Saudi Arabia with respect to Khashoggi. And I wouldn't do that with respect to Israel, and I encourage people not to do that with respect to issues they have with Israel or any other country in the world.
What about the Abraham Accords then? Did you get a sense that Saudi Arabia might normalise ties with Israel, especially given the success that there is now between Israel and the UAE?
It's hard to say. It's complicated. I think that during my time at the White House, we certainly saw indications that they were heading in a good direction. I think that the team after I left made continuous progress, but it's more complicated. It will take time. And I like to refer to countries like Saudi Arabia and Qatar and others as those countries that have not yet signed the Abraham Accords. Ultimately, I do think it's inevitable that this region will band together because they are all fighting a common enemy, Iran. They all have a lot to gain for the young population together. And the Palestinian issue, as much as we'd like to solve it, may not be solvable in the near future. If it is, even better. And if it isn't, none of these countries should hold themselves back from joining together for the betterment of their people.
Jason Greenblatt, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.